Hi everyone, Gundam here for 8th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today, we're going to the 1 Year War era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we are going to explore all the variants of the Colombus-class carrier, their background lore and technological aspects, a topic I will cover on the request of supply line enjoyer David Nagamine. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Colombus-class? A medium-scale supply carrier developed by the Earth Federation forces, the Colombus-class was an entire line of ships, which served the backbone of the Federation supply lines. Introduced in UC-71 alongside the Salamis and Magellan-class lines, the Columbus was specially created to support these ships following the Big Gun Doctrine, which are later to know storage for backup supplies and needed to be replenished regularly to ensure their long-term operationality. To create the Columbus, its manufacturer, Vic Wellington, used a pre-existing machine named the Twin-Hull Assault Carrier, which was an armed transport troop carrier used by the Earth Federation forces in the colonies and usually transported material like tanks and riot-suppressing vehicles. We don't know much about this vehicle, but it's likely it was similar to a Columbus with caterpillar treads and multiple anti-personnel machine guns. Thus, by adapting the twin assault carrier to space, the Columbus was born. The length is still debatable because of a lack of sources and some confusion, but it's generally considered to be between 100 and 130 meters long, and not 145 meters as seen in the Gundam Wiki for example, as it is the same length of some of its variants which are known as significantly longer. With its 110 meters wide hangars, the Columbus could transport the needed supplies through long distance before reaching its target and replenishing it in open space, something very useful during long-lasting operations. However, this large storage capacity was made possible only through the removal of any weapons, which made the Columbus, while very useful, extremely vulnerable if not protected by an escort of ships, usually Salamis. This vulnerability became even worse when mobile suit appeared, and the Columbus, like its friend the Salamis and Magellan, suffered heavy casualties during the Battle of Loon. All these things drew a bad portrait of the Columbus, but it was actually a very good design and quite effective in its own way. First, it was an extremely good supply carrier. The block on the side would open and large robotic arms would make sure the supplies were quickly and efficiently attributed to the ship needed them, in a way that Zeon supply ships like the Papua and the Pazok-class couldn't simply compete with. In addition, the large front doors could open, and when the Federation designed the Pegasus-class, they made sure the new amphibious assault carriers would be able to connect frontal with the Columbus, thus enabling even faster supply delivering. Secondly, the design inherited from the twin assault landing carrier had given the Columbus the necessary gene to become a carrier itself, and the Columbus was quickly retrofitted for vehicle transport, first for the new fighters of the Earth Federation Space Forces like the Saberfish, then for the new bold units, and finally for the mass-produced chimps. Coupling the chimps with the Columbus ended up being a very good thing, since the transported mobile suit could act as a more effective escort than ships and could quickly deploy against enemy mobile suits. Capable of carrying 20 mobile suits, the Columbus was the perfect providential mobile suit carrier for the Federation, outclassing both the Quasin and the Pegasus class in terms of raw mobile suit transport. In some occasions, it could transport as much as 24 chimps or 48 bolts, and even bring along mixed formation with 12 chimps and 24 bolts. Throughout the 1 Year War, the Columbus served faithfully, but like most of the Federation fleet after Abawaku, it suffered very heavy casualties, which led to many ships of the line being destroyed. The few remaining ships either underwent refitment to continue military service, as I will soon present, or were decommissioned and sold to the civilian sector. An example of this, in the UC-120s, the modified Spears R-class Bladewood made use of twin Columbus hangars acquired by Anaheim Electronics, thus continuing the legacy of the Colombus-class. The first of the Columbus variants, a one-of-a-time custom ship featured in the Thunderbolt continuity, are called the massive Beehive. This modified Columbus was the mothership of the Mole Brotherhood, an inner faction of the Earth Federation Space Forces which aimed to liberate Side 4 from Zeon. Saying that the Beehive is a modified Columbus is not quite right, because it is actually the combination of 4 Columbus fused together to create an almost 300 meters long and 4-hull mothership. With this massive size, the Beehive was worthy of its status as a mothership, but it had to add something first to be the real deal. Remember, the regular Columbus was unarmed, and it was something really unfit for a mothership which centralized most of the mobile suit forces of the Brotherhood. To fix that, the Beehive adopted 2 missile launchers and 6 single-barrel beam cannons borrowed from the arsenal of the Colombus-class. In the manga version, it instead used multiple 2-barrel short beam turrets whose origins are not known. To accommodate these beam turrets, some of the storage space was sacrificed to mount powerful generators and cooling systems to handle the beams, but it still retained almost 3 times the mobile suit capacities of a regular Columbus, so about 60 mobile suits. This enabled the Mole Brotherhood to field a large amount of mobile suits without the burden of having to mount them on the hulls of their Salamis and Magellan class, a commonly used but unreliable move. In addition, the Columbus serving as the front lower portion of the Beehive received special sensor panels similar to those used by the Magellan class, which gave it better communication capabilities. Other notable features: the Beehive makes use of 12-plated spherical fuel tanks, a feature shared with a ship of the opposing side, the Gundam-class, and which was later reintroduced years later in the Aswan Kai. During the events of Gundam Thunderbolt, the Beehive served faithfully, but the ship ended up being critically damaged by the Psycho-Zack Ruse B device and was evacuated by the Mole Brotherhood, eventually bringing an end to its service. Now, time for the mass-produced variants, starting with the famous Colombus Kai introduced in Stardust Memory. In the early UC-80s, the Federation sought to rebuild its depleted fleet, notably by refitting the surviving Salamis and Magellans into the version known as the Kai version UC-83 refits. During the war, the Columbus had proved to be a valuable asset, and plans for possible refitments were considered. However, the effectiveness of its duality as a mobile suit carrier supply ship became hardly questioned, and after few thoughts, the General Staff decided to abandon it. Instead, it was decided that they would create a successor variant focusing exclusively on mobile suit transport and another distinctive variant focusing exclusively on supplying duty. The Columbus Kai was actually the former and took the mantle of the Columbus as a supply ship. The original Columbus was made of 2 segmented portions called blocks, but in the waning days of the One-Year War, some of the Columbus participating Operation Star 1 had been modified on site with a 3rd additional block, increasing their storage capacity. The Federation engineers noticed the positive result and generalized this modification to the whole line of surviving Columbus. This meant that the Columbus Kai now inherited this 3rd additional block, and this new addition, coupled with an optimization of the internal storage, increased its supply capacity by nearly 30%. This made the Columbus Kai even better at bringing supplies, and the robotic arms and transfer tubes were also improved and adapted to dock with the Salamis and Magellan UC-83 refits. To improve the mediocre mobility of the original Columbus, the Columbus Kai also received longer and more powerful rear engines, which increased the speed of the supply missions. As an optional equipment, this variant could mount special scanner antennae, which gave it greater communication capabilities and also gave it remote control of the new version of the solar system, the Solar System 2. When multiple nearby Columbus Kai were equipped with these antennae, they created a sort of network linking each other's, which enabled them to transfer the control of the Solar System 2 or to recover it if the Columbus Kai in control was sunk. In the original solar system, the targeting and control were carried by the Magellan-class Titan, but as soon as the Titan was sunk, the control was lost and the solar system couldn't fire for the rest of the battle. With the intelligent use of the scanner antennae, the solar system too could still be used during battle after the control ship was lost, albeit with a lot of performance. In Stardust memory, the Colombus Kai controlling the solar system too was sunk by the Noyut Seal, but as revealed in the game Encounter in Space, another Colombus Kai later recovered the control of what remained of the solar system too, allowing it to fire a second time, as seen in the OVA. After UC-83, the Colombus Kai, unlike the Magellan and Salamis refits, remained in service, partially because it had performed adequately during the Dallas conflict. However, in the mid-UC-80s, most notably during the Grips War, the Colombus Kai faced two unprecedented dangers. The first was the appearance of a smaller and seemingly more effective supply ship, the Space Crane, while the second was the now widespread use of autonomous ships like the Irish and Alexandria-class, which needed far less space resupplies. Fortunately for the Colombus Kai, the Space Crane design soon faded into obscurity, and military budget cuts starting in the early UC-90s greatly impacted the use of costly autonomous ships, meaning that the Colombus Kai became popular once again. In UC-96, one of such ships was seen resupplying the naval Argama after it was damaged by the sleeves, proved that the Colombus Kai went that far in the universal century. Interestingly, the Colombus Kai seen in Unicorn was escorted by some gym trees, which meant that the Colombus Kai eventually did get some mobile suit escort, but still nowhere the armor needed to make a real mobile suit carrier. We talk about the Colombus Kai, who took the mantle as a supply ship. Now, it's time to talk about the variant who did it as a mobile suit carrier, the Antietam-class. Quite surprisingly, the Antietam is externally very similar to the Colombus Kai, as it adopts the addition of the third block, which brings the length to 145 meters. Because of that, differentiating them is very difficult, with the only major difference being the color scheme. While the Colombus Kai adopts a light blue color scheme, the Antietam is instead painted either in white, either in the original Columbus dark paint shop. Another difference is that the bridge of the Antietam is raised above the level of the blocks, while the Columbus and the Colombus Kai has that bridge at the same level. The Antietam is a mobile suit carrier, and thus, while it doesn't need anymore the supply arms and transfer tubes, it retains them, meaning it can still be used as a supply ship. This was mainly possible because the Antietam was not made of modified Columbus, but was built from the ground, notably by analyzing the data of the Colombus Kai, which meant that the Antietam and the Colombus Kai were twin ship. Yes, but that the Antietam was also its daughter ship, which means... Still, internally, it has a larger share of differences with the Colombus Kai. First, the internal storage doesn't usually bring supplies, but entire squadrons of gems which can be easily resupplied during combat. Talking about mobile suits, the Antietam can transport as many as 26 gems, but it usually transported only 20, which is the regular number varied by the original Columbus. Now you will say, why bringing so few mobile suits when it could bring more? Well, this is an example of quality over quantity. The Antietam's most notable features is that it adopts a wide network of mobile suit catapults in its hangars, which can be used to launch from the front doors, but also from the side traps. This results in excellent deploying rates, as this ship can send out and recover multiple mobile suits at the same time and from different directions. With this in mind, it's understandable why it usually fared less mobile suits than what it was capable of. More individual space for its units enabled safer launch, smoother landings, and eased repairs drastically. Also, we have to keep in mind that the Antietam was developed after the 1-year war, and the days of the field that ship with as much mobile suit than possible were definitely over. In the end, only 24 Antietam were manufactured and were soon sent to duty, with many of them being given to the mobile suit academies such as the École du Ciel Academy. In the manga École du Ciel, an Antietam named the Ericsson is used by said academy to transport the students in space for their final exams. According to some sources, some Antietam fixed the most important flaw of the Columbus, its lack of weapon, by adding 8 single-barrel turrets. However, most Antietams did not add this feature, and the lack of weapon remained a problem creeping the Columbus series. After the Grips War, the Antietam became even more of a rarity, and despite a good service, faded into obscurity. And before our last variant, a small message about our sponsor, Site 7 Export. Site 7 Export is an online reseller which has great prices for Bandai and exclusive items, but also include a completely free shipping system. If you like Gundam ships, this is your opportunity to get the X-Model Argama, Musai or even White Base with a 12% discount provided by the promo code UCFacts12. Ever thought, fuck the lack of weapons, fuck the poor mobility, fuck everything. Let's just turn the Columbus into an assault landing carrier? Well, I present you the Columbus dual-use type, a modified version of the original Columbus, introduced in Gundam Sentinel. After the 1 Year War, most of the surviving Columbus had been refitted into Colombus Kai, but some of these did not and were put to storage, only to be taken out of the naphthalene in the mid-UC-80s and modified to serve alongside the new fleet of the Earth Federation Space Forces. Among these modifications was the addition of a large booster piece, made of 8 large fuel tanks and 7 rear engines. Supposedly, this new booster improved the cruising range of the dual-use Columbus, but the enhanced speed was now comparable to the one displayed by the Alexandria-class. According to the Zeta Gundam Define, the Alexandria speed is sufficient enough to catch up with mobile suits, so this meant that the Columbus dual-use type was not to be underestimated during battles. Now, a small problem I found with these ships is the asymmetrical number of rear engines, as the right side had 4 thrusters, while the left side only 3. There is no explanation given, but perhaps it had something to do with mobile suit deployment or for better evading maneuvers. In terms of mobile suit capacities, the dual-use type could transport as many as 36 of them in the occurrence novel gym trees. You may think, hey, how can this variant with no additional storage have higher mobile suit storage than the average Columbus? Well, this is something to be explained. As said earlier, the average Columbus usually transported 20 mobile suits or 24 mobile suits at max capacity. Now, theoretically, the internal storage could transport as many as 50 gyms, but this meant having the gyms stomping on each other, which would render deployment nearly impossible. The Columbus dual-use type didn't take into account the limitations used during the 1 Year War and was filled with second floats, which explain how it could transport nearly 40 units. With all these modifications, the dual-use type could be used on landing operations and to storm lunar cities, but it still suffered from a crippling flaw, which was that it was unable to make it back to orbit after lunar landing, or at least unassisted. During the events of Gundam Sentinel, the AIMLU fleet, tasked to support the Task Force Alpha, possessed 2 Columbus dual-use type, the Iwo Jima and Ivan Gorov, and when the fleet defected to the new sites, the ships passed through them, and were later used during the dogfights over the lunar cities. The last and perhaps only merit of this seemingly cursed variant was to have served, also briefly, as the transport ship for the mighty Gundam Mark V. And we have now recensed all the variants of the Colombus-class. This will be all for today's video, but stay tuned for future lore content delivered on the same channel. Hit the like button and most importantly, comment and subscribe as it really helps the channel to flourish. So long for the new types, until the time of our next special edition.